The Galactic Institute of Psychic Sciences had seen many species pass through its crystalline halls, but never a human. Rafi Martinez stood at the entrance, his worn leather jacket contrasting sharply with the gleaming biometal architecture that seemed to pulse with its own alien heartbeat. His acceptance letter crumpled slightly in his nervous grip as he watched other students float, slither, and phase through the corridors with practiced ease. "Another primitive," hissed Zekthara, a towering Vorthak whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed with bioluminescent patterns. The creature's four eyes fixed on Rafi with predatory interest. "The Mind Hunter has arrived." Zekthara was legendary among the student body, a being whose species had evolved specifically to hunt thoughts, to tear through mental defenses and devour the psychic energy of other creatures. On his homeworld, he was considered a prince among his kind, having already consumed the dreams of 12 different species before his 20th molting cycle. Rafi simply nodded politely and continued toward his assigned dormitory, unaware that his calm demeanor had already marked him as either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid in the eyes of his new classmates. The first incident occurred during Professor Quindal's advanced mental fortification class. The ethereal instructor, whose form shifted between dimensions like living smoke, had paired students for basic psychic probing exercises. "Zekthara," the professor announced, "you will partner with our new human student." The Vorthak's mandibles clicked with anticipation. This would be entertaining and filling. Human minds were supposedly simple, unguarded things. He would pierce through whatever pathetic mental barriers this primitive possessed and feast on the terror within. "Don't worry," Zekthara whispered to Rafi as they sat cross-legged on the meditation platform. "This won't hurt much." Rafi looked confused but nodded agreeably. "Okay, so how does this work exactly? Do I just think really hard?" The Mind Hunter's laughter was like grinding metal. "Close your eyes, little mammal. Let me show you what a real predator can do." Zekthara extended his consciousness, feeling the familiar rush of power as his mental tendrils sought out his victim's mind. He expected to encounter the usual barriers: fear, denial, primitive emotion. Instead, he found nothing. No, not nothing. An open door. Curious despite himself, Zekthara pressed deeper. What he found there shattered every assumption he'd ever held about human cognition. Rafi's mind was not the simple, linear construct the Vorthak had expected. It was vast, impossibly vast, containing not one consciousness but millions of echoes, fragments, possibilities. Every book Rafi had ever read existed as a living world within his psyche. Every movie, every story, every dream had become a universe unto itself. Zekthara found himself standing in the middle of a cosmic battlefield, where humans in impossible armor fought against entities that defied comprehension. He watched in horror as these dream warriors wielded weapons that could crack planets and spoke casually of traveling between dimensions as if discussing the weather. "You like that one?" Rafi's voice echoed through the mindscape, strangely casual. "That's from this old game I used to play, but check this out." The scene shifted, and Zekthara was suddenly witness to humans who had transcended their physical forms entirely, beings of pure will who reshaped reality with their thoughts. They built civilizations in the spaces between atoms and turned stars into stepping stones across the galaxy. "Or there's this," Rafi continued. And now the Mind Hunter saw humans who had learned to weaponize love itself, whose capacity for hope could literally tear holes in the fabric of despair. But it was the next vision that truly broke Zekthara's composure. He saw humans who refused to give up, ever, under any circumstances. Humans who would fight against impossible odds not because they believed they could win, but because fighting was what humans did. He witnessed mothers lifting vehicles to save their children, soldiers charging into certain death to protect strangers, and ordinary people choosing to be heroes simply because someone had to. "The thing about humans," Rafi's mental voice explained, "is that we dream of being better than we are. And then we actually try to make those dreams real." Zekthara tried to withdraw but found he couldn't. Rafi's mind wasn't just vast, it was sticky, addictive. Every human story contained within it spoke of creatures who refused to accept limitations, who looked at the impossible and said, "Not yet." "Please," the Vorthak whispered, his physical body trembling on the meditation platform. "Let me out." "Oh, sure," Raffi said. And suddenly the Mindhunter was back in his own consciousness, gasping for air he didn't technically need. The class stared in stunned silence as Zekthara collapsed, his bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically. Professor Quindal materialized more solidly, concern evident even in their shifting form. "What happened?" the professor asked. Raffi scratched his head, looking genuinely puzzled. "I'm not really sure, I just kind of opened up." He seemed interested in human dreams, so I showed him a few. Later that evening, Alvina Chen found Raffi in the common area, still looking confused by the day's events. She was one of only 3 humans at the Institute specializing in empathic resonance. "So," she said, settling beside him with 2 cups of something that resembled coffee but glowed faintly blue, "I heard you broke Zekthara." "I didn't mean to," Raffi protested. "I just shared some of my favorite stories. You know, Superman, Star Trek, Warhammer 40K, that kind of thing." Alvina nearly choked on her drink. "Raffi, you showed a professional mind predator our mythology, our dreams of becoming gods and heroes and explorers of infinite possibility. Was that bad?" "Not bad," she said, watching as Zekthara hurried past their table without making eye contact. "Just very human." The next morning, Professor Quindal announced that the psychic probing exercise had been permanently modified. Apparently, human consciousness was to be considered a specialized research subject, requiring advanced clearance and protective equipment. Raffi raised his hand. "Does this mean I can't be anyone's practice partner?" "On the contrary," the professor replied. "You've just become the most requested research subject in the Institute's history. It seems everyone wants to understand how a species can dream themselves into becoming the very myths they create." As the semester progressed, word spread throughout the galactic community about the humans at the Institute. Not because of their psychic abilities, which were admittedly quite modest by galactic standards, but because of what their minds contained. Every species that had ever encountered humanity in their dreams left with the same unsettling realization. These creatures didn't just imagine better worlds and better selves. They actually believed such things were achievable. And perhaps, most terrifying of all, they had a disturbing tendency to be right.